If I feel that I can't do something, or I feel that I'm not of authority to speak on something, all I have to ask myself is, am I prepared for this? If something doesn't go the way I expect it to, then I will get really hard on myself rather than saying, okay, I learned this from that opportunity, and next time I want to try this instead. Rather than letting it pull you down, let it be something that empowers you. Well, hello, and welcome back to the Successful Stylist Academy podcast. I am your host, Ambrosia Carey. This is a mini series that I'm lovingly calling Naked and Afraid. Naked because I am unscripted, I am not doing any edits, and afraid because we're talking about fears, doubts, regrets, learning lessons, any hardships that I have gone through in the process of owning a business or working with multiple businesses as well. So thank you for joining me live. If you're here live, and if not, if you're hearing the recording, I would also love to hear from you in a Apple podcast review. So leave your review there and let me know what you want to talk more about. And I'm here for you. So today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. Something that I think we like to pretend that doesn't happen to us, but most people, at least if you're a living, breathing person that cares about what you do, everyone that I've ever met has dealt with some form of imposter syndrome. Some people have a harder time getting through it than others. So, again, this is not scripted. So I really want to kind of walk through the process with you of what I personally have dealt with on my end, but even just talking to other business owners who have dealt with this themselves, I can assure you that because it's something that we deal with, that we go through this psychological part, that we have this doubt, or we don't want to celebrate an accomplishment, or we feel like we're exposing ourselves possibly as a fraud. I want you to know that you're not alone and that this is something completely normal to go through in the progression of the successes that you get to celebrate. It could be something as simple as you had an expectation and it just didn't quite get there, or it might have been it didn't land the way that you hoped that it would. Or it's possible even that you are a perfectionist, and that's usually what the case is. At least in my case, that is exactly what it is. I am definitely a perfectionist, and I struggle through it. And it probably sounds like such a silly thing to complain about, but it's something that's very normal because for those of us who really care about the work that we do, we really put a lot of stock into what we think is going to come out the other end instead of just moving through the process of letting it happen and seeing what does unfold. Sometimes we get a little ahead of ourselves. And that is because a lot of the times when we are in business, we are literally building the plane as we're flying it. So it's hard for us to focus on what's ahead because all we're doing is trying to catch up with what's happening. And that's why typically for people who have gone through that season before and have either failed, learned, tried, retried, they typically do a little bit better when it comes to maneuvering around it the second or third or fourth time around. So it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't mean that just because I've personally gone through imposter syndrome that it won't happen again. As a matter of fact, what's strange about it is that ironically, because I have gone through imposter syndrome myself many times over different things, and it hits me at the most inopportune time. Usually it happens when I am really stressed out, on the verge of burnout, probably lacking sleep, probably need to eat. Probably. Usually it's like the main things that we need to do to take care and foster ourselves to be healthy on the inside. A lot of those things come up for us in a psychological way. So for me, for instance, because perfectionism is such a big thing, if something doesn't go the way I expect it to, then I will get really hard on myself rather than saying, okay, I learned this from that opportunity, and next time I want to try this instead. And rather than letting it pull you down, let it be something that empowers you. So what I was going to tell you about, like a specific scenario, I'll just talk about this. There was a time that, this is going to sound so silly, but there was a time that I entered into a contest, and this was a hair coloring competition, by the way. And I was really nervous about it. I knew I wanted to enter into this competition, and I happened to place top 5. And instead of me being really excited about it, the opposite happened. I got really stressed out. I hyper focused on it. I started to overthink it. I looked at the other contestants to see what they had entered. I looked at the other winners to see who I was up against. I immediately put my ego on the top rung, so to speak. Like, I let my ego make decisions for me. What's interesting about the ego is that I think we have a tendency to think of ego in a negative connotation, but I kind of want to make it seem more like something that lets you see yourself as a person and who you expect yourself to be, thinking of yourself versus who you need to show up for and what is around you and what you can learn from the things around you, I guess. So, when I think of ego in the aspect of I have a high expectation of myself. I don't want to let myself down. I don't want to let others down. I don't want to hear critique from others because they may say something that echoes what I'm feeling myself, which is that my work is not good enough. People don't like my stuff. I shouldn't have put it out there. So there's the ego speaking. But the ego can also work in a positive way where I put my work out there and I meet other people who are just like me, and I inspire them to get up themselves and try the next time around. And I get to spread my story and my knowledge with the next person so that they feel that they're equipped to go walk in and throw themselves in the ring as well. So that's where the ego can also be coming from a place of self-love, and that is kind of where perfectionism comes from too, but it's also the thing that makes me care about my work and care about the way I hold myself and the way I present myself. And it makes me want to become better at what I've done previously and work toward getting better. Anyway, I'm rambling. I think you catch a drift, but I wanted to kind of scratch that surface a little bit just because I think ego, it can be seen in two different lights, but it's also something that really does support or get in the way of imposter syndrome. So ironically, because it's something that gets us into imposter syndrome, it's also the thing that can help us get out of imposter syndrome. If we can take a good look at it and just ask ourselves, is this true? Is this my ego right now? Is this something that's getting in my way because this is the narrative that I built into my head, or is this actually happening? And if it really is happening, am I okay with it? Am I going to wake up tomorrow? Am I, like basic functioning skills? So I think that's where logic over, that perfectionist, illogical thought process can work either with one another or against one another. So, yeah, I think being prepared is always something that is going to help someone who feels that feeling of imposter syndrome. If I feel that I can't do something, or I feel that I'm not of authority to speak on something, then all I have to ask myself is, am I prepared for this? Like if I were going to do a talk, let's say, like I'm just using an example, like if I were to do a presentation, or let's say I was going to talk to people, or even on the podcast, like the irony of all this is that this is Naked and Afraid, the mini series. So I'm not prepared at all. I just am talking about things that come to mind I'm speaking from the heart, and I'm talking about something that is vulnerable for me. And this is a goal that I set for myself actually back in January of this year. I really wanted to push myself and come from a place of vulnerability and talk about things that I think we want to pretend doesn't happen, that we sweep under the rug, that we should be stepping forward and shedding more light on, and a little more awareness around the fact that these are all normal conditions of being a business owner. These are all normal conditions of being a human that cares about things. And this is all stuff that we can also help ourselves to gain the confidence and to gain the security and to rewrite, I guess, that psychological pattern that happens to us. It doesn't mean that we'll be perfect at it, but it does mean that if we at least take a look at it rather than sweeping it under the rug or pretending it's not there, then it will help us be more equipped to get to that next stage or that next level or that next goal that we're really trying to achieve. So being prepared, let's go back to that. I am getting distracted today. Being prepared means that you are writing thorough notes. Maybe you write a love note to yourself. Maybe you're writing a journal. Maybe you actually reach out to some friends and you talk about it with them. Maybe you have a counselor or a coach that you can talk to. Either way, just make sure that you are prepared for what it is that you want. Put that out into the universe and you just go through the entire process in your head of what's worst case scenario, what's best case scenario, and what am I doing this for? So the other side of being prepared, I really truly believe this is that do you really know what you want out of it? Because most people, there's not enough clarity, and therefore it's easy to get stuck in the parts that have nothing to do with the actual thing. So let me use an example. I remember having imposter syndrome when I first bought into the salon. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, just like what most people do. I was a hairstylist who was savvy with business. I understood a lot about marketing because I was going to school for marketing before I became a hairstylist. And I just applied the principles of the things I learned to this new salon an existing salon that I bought into. The downside is the salon was in the red. The big walkout happened. Other people were leaving. There wasn't enough income coming into the salon. So I was, just in fight or flight mode. And I remember having this thought, and this is where like many meltdowns happened later on, that I was like, what have I done? Who do I think I am to buy into a failed company and try to revive it? I've never done this before. What gives me the authority? So again, that fraud thought in my head came to mind. I had to remind myself, you are ready for this. You have been through this. You have been a part of a very successful company. You've added a lot of value to that place. You know how to foster relationships. You have a strong clientele. You have been growing an education team for years. You've been a part of brand education for a long time. You've got this. So I almost had to play a little bit of this like devil and angel conversation, so to speak, like those cartoons when like the devil pops up and then the angel. So I had to have them kind of duke it out a little bit in order for me to really feel like, okay, I'm actually prepared. So what am I not prepared for? So I wrote a list of things that I needed to learn. And then all you have to do is just check off the boxes. You just learn one thing at a time. And then all of a sudden it becomes so much more clear and it's easier. And it also is empowering. It makes you feel a certain way, like I can do anything. And by feeling that way, it also helps you not fall into that icky pattern, I suppose, of feeling imposter syndrome and letting it dictate or decide what's going to happen in your future. The other thing I think is important, though, on the flip side, is to think ahead. So remember I was talking about building the plane as we're flying it, and that's what a lot of people do. But thinking ahead is really just asking yourself, what do I need to be prepared for? So if I were going to use the plane analogy again, like what do they need to do for safety and measures that they have to take in order to make sure that everyone feels safe on this plane? What would they do if X, Y, or Z were to happen? And they have to go through training to be prepared for it, right? But they also have to think ahead. So if something were to happen, they know who the first person if you're a passenger and you're in the oh my gosh, the emergency row. If you're in the emergency exit, you have to give a verbal confirmation that you are going to be prepared to take the next step if that happens. So thinking ahead is vital and important to wiggle yourself out of imposter syndrome and to keep yourself from getting in there as well. So that's something that I've just learned in time, but it's also something I've learned as I've talked to so many different businesses. And as a business consultant, one of the biggest things that people get in the way of is themselves. So my job is to kind of pick at that a little bit and kind of open it up and dig in there and find out what is hiding in here that is getting in your way. And that is the part that I really enjoy the most about consulting other business owners. Okay, so what else can we talk about this? What if you attempt something and you fail? Like now you're prepared for the next time. and then you can attempt again. I have used this analogy before, so bear with me if you've heard it, but it's like kind of the Roadrunner situation. Like, I'm dating myself, but if you guys have ever seen the Roadrunner, or if you know the cartoon or familiar with it, the Wile E. Coyote is trying to catch the Roadrunner and attempts over and over and over, but every attempt is done in a very different way. So if the Wile E. Coyote just attempted the same thing twice, but just tweaked it slightly, he could have actually caught the Roadrunner. But instead, there was like a totally different way that he wanted to go about it. So I just find it really interesting that we, as people who run through processes, we almost feel like because something didn't work, we have to either scratch it or reinvent something, or say to ourselves, oh, it didn't work. And instead of doing that, I really hope that by you listening to this, and if you hear any sort of yourself while I'm talking, that's something that you yourself can apply in the future, that you'll actually try it again, but just tweak it slightly. So regardless, we're not solving any problems in this evening or day or whenever you're listening to this. It takes lots of practice, but I want to leave you with one last thought, and it comes down to one simple word: mindfulness. When you're mindful of your thoughts, when you're mindful of the cause and effect of things, and you're mindful of the things that you really want, then I think setting a larger goal than this conditional goal is going to be the very first, or major step, I should say, in avoiding this from happening, or at least getting you out of it as fast as possible. So let me give you an example. When a thought enters my mind where I'm like, I just shouldn't do this. It's too much work. I need to just give up. I'm just not equipped for this. I think I'm just trying to do too many things. I have too many things on my plate. Does that sound familiar? Have you been there before? So what I say to myself when that happens is I say, stop. You're not doing this because you want more fame or followers. You're not doing this to stroke your ego. You're doing this because you want to help somebody who's ready to hear it. You want to do this because you're passionate about it and you care. And you want to do this because this is something that means it's about more than you. It's something that you get to pass the torch on to someone else and offer opportunity to other people. That's why it's called Successful Stylist Academy and not called Ambrosia Carey. So I think it's really important that we have to remind ourselves of these things sometimes, because we're still human. We're still individual people that we have thoughts, we have emotions, we care, we get tired, we get angry, we get hungry. And these are all things that we oftentimes will beat ourselves up for being human, when it's the very reason why it makes you so special and so important. So I hope that gives you just a nice little thought to give yourself the next time you feel this way. And I really hope that you join us next week. We are opening up to anybody who has ever purchased a course or has ever done any consulting or has worked with any coach with SSA. You have access next week to get into our membership. It's not quite open to the public yet, but there is a way to join the waitlist. We're doing this with lots of thought and intention. Eventually, this will be the only offer that we have for now. We do still have some courses, but we really want to put some time and attention to the membership, because we feel like that is a really great place that we can have a strong community, that we can all lean on one another and help one another. So I want to invite you, and you are welcome to join the waitlist right now. I will leave that in the show notes. And if you're watching live, I will make sure to include that in our bio so that you can click on it and check it out. And then you'll get more information about it once it opens up. I want to thank you again, and I want to encourage you all to please dream big, set goals, and take action. I'll see you soon.